What's up, guys? Welcome back to DYAD in the Force. This is the Star Wars Outlaw review. As one of our only contemporary open-world Star Wars games, Outlaws has a difficult standard to meet. I'm just gonna address all the hate that this game has been getting right out of the gate. A lot of these so-called reviews that call this game the worst game ever are garbage. Many of them chose to hate the game before it even came out, or depend on the crowd that need this game to be bad in order to get views, a pattern we see a lot in Star Wars. A funny thing happens when you choose to hate first. You start with that conclusion and work backwards to find everything to support that conclusion. We live in an era of brain rot. It's gotta be a 10 or it's a 1. And this noise has largely made it very difficult to critique things constructively. Now, that's not to say all unfavorable reviews are unreliable. Everyone's taste is different, but it's clear that some of these worst game ever reviews have only just played the game enough to have supported their conclusion rather than give it a fair shake. The reason I know they haven't given it a fair shake is because most of their complaints are either answered in game or are answered later in the game. One complaint said it was the worst stealth game ever, complaining about not being able to shoot out cameras and disable alarms with their blaster without being detected, to which I say, skill issue. You can disable cameras and security measures by doing what they do in Star Wars, slice into the systems. This isn't Hitman, this isn't Splinter Cell, your blaster isn't silenced or suppressed, and Kves is a run-of-the-mill outlaw/smuggler. As you progress through the game, you will unlock new abilities and learn new tricks from mentors. That said, it's not the best stealth game either. So here's my review of Star Wars Outlaws from the perspective of a game designer. I'm gonna start with the cons. Stealth is easy, a bit too easy. But I also chalk it up to it also being accessible. It's not going to test your wits like a Dishonored or Hitman, and that's probably because it's not touted or marketed as a stealth game through and through. It's an outlaw game where you can be a thief, smuggler, or gunslinger, and with Nyx by your side, it's almost impossible to fail once you've gotten the hang of it. That said, one of my issues comes with how the game has several hard stops in the form of, quote, do not get caught, or do not raise an alarm. But most of the time it hard stops you when you're first seen, which is counterintuitive if you can prevent that person from raising an alarm or fast talk your way into a stun shot. And aside from a few canned animations with stealth takedowns, there's really little to no variety with which K performs them. It's a typical knockout punch or a sucker punch. This made stealth feel stale at times as you have long sneak missions and you repeatedly see sucker punches. Let's try to have some fun with these takedowns. The speeder controls are bad, and it almost feels like Star Wars for it to be bad, considering how many speeder deaths we've seen in Star Wars from just randomly crashing. It lacks multiple camera views, so you can't see anything if there's dust being kicked up in front of you in a chase or follow, and on mouse and keyboard you can't pan the camera, it steers, which causes a lot of problems when you instinctually or habitually just want to stare at the scenery or look around your peripheral while riding. That said, I don't agree with the design decision to holster the blaster while on the speeder except during adrenaline rushes. If they felt that strongly about going into towns guns blazing, they could have enforced the holster in towns. But as of now, it just feels like a waiting game for your adrenaline rush to pop up before you can truly react to enemies. I mean, they're shooting while riding. The best design solution I can think of is attaching pursuit mode to the speeder controls, which is a mode during space combat where piloting is automatic. Once you've locked onto an enemy fighter, you can freely aim to shoot them down. In this case, you can enable pursuit mode on the speeder where piloting is automatic and you're given a small berth to try and aim and shoot manually at your attacker. The gunplay could use a lot of work. This is also another example of reviewers who just didn't play the game, as I keep seeing the same complaint about having a single blaster and not feeling the variety. But you can pick up any weapon your enemy uses, and K's blaster in particular has 3 modes for 3 types of blaster fire, 3 different firing modes for plasma, ion, and power, which essentially makes it feel like 9 different weapons entirely. And then there's the upgrade system with different perks. But back to the gunplay. It feels like if Uncharted had a child with The Last of Us and it only feels rewarding during adrenaline rushes. I didn't experience too many bugs with my playthrough. I'm on PC with a Ryzen 9 5900X and an RTX 3070, and I acknowledge that everyone's experience may vary, so I'm not going to confirm nor deny the existence of bugs. I've noticed that Tatooine in particular doesn't like to load in textures, making everything look muddy at times. I did run into this bug where after dealing with an Imperial convoy, the carriers themselves still considered themselves engaged in combat, and I couldn't fast travel. The space battles were underwhelming. I like the piloting controls and pursuit mode, which I'll talk about in my pros of the game, but outside of contracts and missions, there's very little incentive for you to actually go into orbit and spend time in space. Which is fine, this isn't Squadrons. Also, small nitpick, but this plagues every game. Why can't walk speeds ever match NPCs? Every single follow me quest or mission, the NPC either walks fast or slow. The player avatar walk speed is either slower or faster, causing you to stop and go no matter what. Devs, just fix this already. With all that said, let's get to the pros of Star Wars Outlaws. World building. This game is just good, and I've enjoyed the story, the missions, and the gameplay despite my issues with it because they're far and few when I exist inside the Star Wars universe, and I'm able to explore Kijimi, Tatooine, Toshara, and all the locales it has to offer. The worlds feel lived in, people going about their business, hating the Empire, doing their jobs. Most of the time in open world games, it feels touristy. The cities have a few vendors for you to visit, but they made each place you visit in Star Wars Outlaws come alive, with fathier races, sabacc parlors, random games you can play within the game you're already playing. They even have mini games for when you sit down to eat with Nix. And yes, I went to the Lars homestead and created my own binary sunset. Puzzles and slicing. The slicing system feels fun and inventive. I was interested to see how they'd present the slicing in this game, given how paramount it is within the Star Wars universe, and they truly nailed it. With the rhythm game of the data port slicing, or the Wordle game of slicing terminals, it never felt boring or repetitive. It felt like Star Wars. And just like I said earlier, you can slice just about anything you want when it comes to getting your job done and making it as easy as you need it to be. Disabling cameras, bypassing turrets, disabling energy barriers, and with the help of Nix, anything is possible. I love that there's tall grass, even in industrial facilities, by using the condensed smog. Other puzzles present themselves with using Nix to open shutters, destroying walls with the right blaster, or finding ways to open doors with keycards. What's so great about the map design in this game is that part of the sneaking game is also finding new and interesting ways in and around obstacles. Progression. The progression system is refreshing. We're so used to grinding XP to level up and unlock abilities. It's a good change of pace to tie K-Vess's progression into her learning from experts and mentors and completing challenges. Most of the things you'll unlock early on are just things you'll do while playing the game, and I like that it incentivizes you to experiment with your gameplay to unlock abilities rather than grinding XP. Space battles. Now, as I mentioned before, space in general is underwhelming, but where there is a dogfight, it feels accessible and rewarding. It's not Flight Sim's level of intricacy or Squadrons by any stretch of the imagination, but I love how accessible it is. With Pursuit mode, you can let the game pilot for you and you can concentrate on aiming at your enemy. And sometimes that's a good thing. I struggled in Squadrons managing all of my shields, weapons, and thrusters, and I couldn't. But I have some friends who shine in that environment. But this isn't a Starfighter game, so I've come to accept that for the most part, it's a part of the game, and not a highlight. Loading screens. The game does an excellent job of hiding loading screens. I much prefer the landing and takeoff sequences to a Starfield's modal after modal of clicking buttons to get places. You can go from city to overworld to takeoff to hyperspace, all heads up. There's no separate menu for you to go into. As a game designer, I'm a big fan of getting out of the player's way, so the less screens you have to navigate and the less buttons you need to press out of game or out of avatar, the better. But if that's not your jam, don't worry, because the game doesn't force you into that pipeline. It has an amazing fast travel system that just works. They unlock as you visit places, and outside of mission locks and restrictions, you can fast travel anywhere at any time. And while this will give you a loading screen, it's usually faster. You can go from one planet to another using fast travel, from city to orbit, from orbit to city, from planet to city. Each city usually has multiple fast travels, making traversal easy and quick, especially given how terrible the speeder controls are. It's a small rock. Why did I crash? Faction system. The faction system feels good. In any other setting, it would make sense. In Star Wars, it feels even more earned. You'll find yourself at odds with certain factions at times as you work jobs that are unfavorable to another faction, but it's really easy to actually get on the good sides of all of the factions. It also tends to make missions easier on you as you have natural access to the faction's territory if you're on their good graces. Get on their bad side and you've got kill squads all over you within their territory and outside of it. On the flip side, chalking everything up to rep feels like it limits opportunity. Being barred from certain areas of the map due to reputation seems excessive, given not everyone surely knows you on guard duty. It seems like a missed opportunity to have Kay fast talk her way into places, bribe, or persuade, which is something that's sorely missing from a game about outlaws. Persuasion checks. Lore. The game has a huge respect for Star Wars canon. It goes out of its way several times to give you that reference you'll recognize right away. It's set in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, so there will be plenty of callbacks to the past and present. From hearing about the Battle of Scarif, exploring High Republic ruins and Clone Wars factories, or seeing Han encased in carbonite, it wants to so terribly respect the canon comics as meeting Kira and the Crimson Dawn, and the story surrounding the factions makes obvious callouts to the events of Bounty Hunters, Crimson Reign, and the Hidden Empire comic runs. Overall, Star Wars Outlaws rewards you for playing your cards right, especially at the sabacc parlors. But in particular, it's a game for Star Wars fans to get all nerdy about being in the Star Wars world. We have the Jedi games by Respawn, which gives you that Jedi fantasy, and now we have the open world of Outlaws, which gives you the smuggler fantasy. Being able to walk through these worlds that we've either seen in the movies or read about in the books just fills me with nerd juice. Going to the Lars homestead right at Twin Sunset, going to the cantina in Mos Eisley where Luke and Obi-Wan began their journey, dealing with Jabba the Hutt, walking through cities filled with aliens and interesting people. If you're a Star Wars fan, like a fan that actually enjoys Star Wars and doesn't need Star Wars to fit into their idealistic mold, you'll have fun with this game. If you've ever wanted to work for the Hutts, Crimson Dawn, get to know the Ashiga clan, or even stick it to the Pikes, you'll enjoy the game. If you've ever wanted to be a smuggler in Star Wars and pull off the grandest of heists, you'll definitely enjoy this game. Now, in terms of price, I can't tell you whether it's worth it or not. That's a value prop you're gonna have to assess yourself. But once you've made that assessment, I can tell you, you will enjoy this game. Does it have issues? Yes. Is it a perfect game? No. Is it the worst game? Absolutely not. It's a good game, and I think it's about time we get back to the good old days where a good game, a solid 7 or 8 out of 10, was okay, because back in my day, it was really difficult to get a 10, and now it seems everybody just wants 10s. Outlaws will give you an enjoyable experience as a Star Wars fan, and you will find some enjoyment in it if you're there to enjoy things. As for my overall rating, I'd probably give it a solid 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more Star Wars content. Tune in every Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific for our podcast with Darth Choco, where we talk about all things Star Wars, including the latest announcements, as well as have weekly lessons on Star Wars lore. Subscribe for more videos. And as always, that's it. On to the next one. For Light and for Life, we are all Star Wars. May the Force be with you.